sorry. It's 6 p.m. and I'm calling the Thursday, June 12th Planning Board regular meeting to order. First order of business is the adoption of the agenda. Do I have a motion for that?
I'll make a motion to adopt the agenda.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. The next order of business is the approval of the April 10th regular meeting minutes.
I'll make a motion to adopt the minutes from the April 10th regular meeting.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. The next is public comment. Do we have anybody signed up for public comment?
Not on the form.
Okay. All right, we're going to move on down to new business. A, SUP 25-000001, Osprey Crystal Shores Golf Cart Beach Parking.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to have a full house and all this participation. SUP 25, and I'll just say 1, we'll skip all the zeros just for brevity, is an application by Osprey and Crystal Shores Homeowners Association requesting a special use permit to establish designated parking area for bicycles, golf carts, and low-speed vehicles to serve the 48 residences of the 2 homeowners associations on Osprey Drive. The association, the HOAs have signed a lease agreement with Jeffries for the top portion of just above where the town has public parking, directly behind us. The property is zoned R20, currently vacant. The surrounding zoning to the north is R20, to the east is R15, to the south is the Atlantic Ocean, and to the west is R20 with the town's public parking. Currently, the site improvements are a crossover, and the total leased area is 12,100 square feet. Staff's recommendation is to approve. The Campbell Land Use Plan classifies the property for the future land use as low-density residential. The UDO Table 4-1 parking lots principal are allowed by special use permit in all zoning districts except for Condé, which is why we're here. And for a commercial plan review, I'm going to delete that bottom part. I'm not sure how that got in there. So included in the included with the staff report are the submitted plans. There's a site plan prepared by Charles Riggs, as well as the application itself. And there's also a presentation that I think Bree Chapman put together. And she's not here tonight, but we do have some members of the HOA that are here to speak on this matter. So they've received their camera permit, and there's also 2 emails from both the fire chief and the police chief stating that they have no issues with the request. I've gone back and forth with NCDOT. NCDOT's comment was that if they developed within the right-of-way, they would have to get a driveway application and an easement agreement. But in this case, the plans that we've reviewed are putting down gravel and designating, kind of finishing it off where the golf carts can park to where that you don't have everyone just helter-skelter. So there should not be a need for driveway permit, NCDOT driveway permit, or the town in that matter, unless they decide to further develop that and make it more of a driveway. One of the questions that the NCDOT engineer had was would the town have an issue with the golf carts crossing over the multi-use path? That already occurs up and down. And in some instances, there's vehicles, cars and trucks that are crossing over the multi-use path. So a lighter weight golf cart should not be an issue. So, is there any question from the board, any of the board members, before I invite them up to discuss their presentation? No other concerns? Okay. All right. All right. Now, is it possible, can you get the presentation on one of them?
I can put it on both of them.
Okay. Great.
You know exactly what page you're saying?
What page? Sorry, that's kind of loud. 24? Starts on 24. That's the printout if you want to just kind of go over that or discuss what you don't have to in as much detail or as little detail as you want. We're here all night.
Good evening. My name is Dave Dowsomer. I'm the president of Crystal Shores HOA, and I represent 48 families and their members here. I want to thank you for your time and attention to this very small issue. Our interest is public safety. We've already applied for a crosswalk in this same region that we're speaking of. We're trying to get our members from one side to the other side safely, and for the convenience of getting access to the beach for their enjoyment. So we're just trying to allow people to get their belongings, whether it's chairs and umbrellas and other things they carry with them, over to the beach. We've received a lease of 20 years from Mr. Jeffries and his land there for the use of golf carts and bicycles to be used on this piece of land, non-buildable land, just to get over to the other side of the beach. Mr. Jeffries is in significant support of this effort. He actually wants to have this available if he does develop his property in the future, and he has access to this. So this is going to be used not just by our two HOAs and 48 families, but Mr. Jeffries and whoever else he decides to invite as a guest. It's a very simple plan. It's just basically a very small plot that's going to be finished and graded with some weed retardant paper, some 57 gravel, and pictured framed in so we don't lose the rocks to wash out. That will also determine and denote where the golf carts are to go. And we have the private property on both sides of the road to go directly perpendicular across the road and do it in a safe fashion. With the addition of that crosswalk, it will be very, very helpful because cars then will have to slow down and allow us the right of way. This is not an area that's going to get high traffic. We don't even have that many golf carts in our development. So there's going to be, people, throughout the week and weekends using this. It's only for our use, and any guests have to be with us to use it. So this will not be a heavily trafficked area. We have discussed the plans with both the fire chief and the police chief, and they have stated that this should not be any additional burden to their services, which is important. So I'm asking and requesting the access from private to private property for use of golf cart and bicycle parking.
The one thing that I'd like to add that we did discuss and forgot to mention this evening, that you have a landscaper for the HOAs that's going to
Maintain, yes.
That they're going to maintain.
So we will
that
have
lot.
trash pickup, we will have weeds taken care of, we will have this area looking good all times because the people who take care of our common areas will be then asked to take care of this area as well. Thank you. Yes, please.
I was wondering about, are you parking in a place where you have to have a permit or something, or are they requiring you to have permits, or saying you can park?
So it's our private area
Okay,
that we're leasing,
I
so there
see.
will be no need, but we will be policing it on our own to make sure that people are following the rules that we have created, that they are going to be respectful to that land, trash will be picked up and so forth. So we're going to designate where they actually park, so someone's not just going off on their own. And again, there's a few people with golf carts at this time. We're thinking that once we get this built, more people will purchase a golf cart so they can get their things to the beach and not have to walk
Yeah, it's a long
the half a
walk.
mile or three-quarters of a
Right,
mile to
right.
the beach. Yes.
Okay, good.
I just have a question. Where the yellow arrow is that where the crosswalk is, where you're thinking of putting the crosswalk and
Yes, it'll be just adjacent to that yellow arrow. So our property actually extends down to the south there that's not actually seen. We're going to put gravel on our side, if you will, the non-beach side, so the golf carts will have a place to go. Right now, there's a very good-sized pothole that exists right there. But the golf carts will be delineated to go there, and then we stay on our property, and we can actually be perpendicular across the road to where the telephone pole is. It's the
Right.
property that's just south of that telephone pole that enters the 50-foot parcel. So it's 50 foot in the width, but it goes the length to the beach, 123 feet.
okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, and I really couldn't tell. It looks like there's a dune there, so was there a crossover once you park the golf carts to
Yes.
access the beach, or do they have to walk down the multi-use lane to get to a crosswalk?
Very good question. So there is a primary berm and a secondary berm. These are both actually sand that's been pushed there. The actual dune that pre-existed is completely covered over with the land that has been covered with sand from the storm restoration. So we actually have just two areas. We're planning to leave Mother Nature alone as most of the areas that we can. We don't want to touch the vegetation and other growth there. So we're actually going to be walking around the secondary berm to get to the primary berm. And we presently have that we've been approved for a walkover beach access.
Okay, so in an ideal situation, you don't anticipate the golf carts traveling south on the multi-use path?
No, they're just going to go crossing it perpendicular, sir.
Okay, and and DOT will put the crosswalk in? Who's gonna put the crosswalk in?
Well, we made a request, so you have to make a request with the DOT, and you pay for the paint, so we have that all ready to roll with this project, yes, sir.
Okay.
It's really pretty simple, but they have certain paint that's required, and they want it done a certain way, and we have to follow those rules.
Do you have something in place to prevent other tourists or other people looking for a place to park?
Golf carts, because what we have, and I'm glad you brought this up. So our idea for the parking area is to have a very narrow area. Golf carts are 4 foot wide, so we'll have this about 5, maybe 6 feet, just so people don't hit the posts. And we're going to have it roped off with posts. And then there will be a designated area for the golf carts to be parked. There's already a sign that's posted right at the end of where the proposed parking area is. It says private property. Only HOA members of Osprey, which includes the 2 HOAs, for use. Prosecutors will be violators will be prosecuted. Excuse me. So we have the sign there, and that's at the very top of the golf parking area. Then before you go over our beach access walk, we have the exact same sign that states the same thing, private use only. And then we have another sign that's actually from the beach side coming over, so someone's not accessing it from the beach. So they are clearly marked with those intentions.
So if somebody brings a motorcycle or a bicycle and tries to park there, unless they're a member of your group, will you tow them, or how are you?
So because
that.
we're going to post the rules, and they'll be posted at the bottom of those signs, we will be able to then contact, if necessary, police to have them removed. Hopefully, it won't come to that. Hopefully, just one of the members will say, "Excuse me, did you see the signs there? Can you please be respectful?" We're only expecting bicycles and golf carts, so no motorized vehicles. There's not going to be any oil, gasoline spillage. It's just golf carts and bicycles, and we're going to put a bicycle rack so that the bikes know where they go.
Thank you. I don't think there are any more questions, are there?
Well, again, I want to say thank you very much for your time this evening, and the questions were very helpful. I'm glad we were able to clarify some of those issues, so thanks. And Deb, much thanks to you.
Thank you. We're going to need a motion to approve as staff.
We had, is Mr. Andrews here?
Yes,
Did you want to speak?
the next topic.
Sorry. So I need a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve SUP 25-000001 as staff has written, that it's compatible with the comprehensive plan.
Okay,
I'll
thank you.
second it.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, motion has passed. Okay, we're gonna move on to SUP 25-0002.
Second application is by Mr. Chris Kerrigan for modification to the conditional use permit 10001 for the Palm Tree Market in Tiki Bar. He'd like to keep the existing structures, particularly the 2 decks with the tables and chairs, and add additional parking. He's willing to work with the town and states that he is also trying to find a noise buffer solution. So the property is zoned B1. It's on the corner of New River Inlet Road, opposite of Topsail Reef. To the north, the property is zoned R8. To the east, R8. To the south is R5, which is Topsail Reef. And to the west is R10. The site improvements are the convenience store, a couple of wood decks, blacktop, and a shed. The size of both lots combined is a little over a half acre at 0.6277 acres. Staff's recommendation is to approve with conditions. The future land use map from the Cayman Land Use Plan classifies the property as mixed-use business. For the conditional use permit that was approved in 2010 in the Palm Tree Market Commercial Site Plan by Weston Lyle, dated May 25th, 2010, the applicant then, Sean Cook, had obtained permits for the proposed development and passed final inspections in July 2010. Subsequently, front and back patios, soundstage were not indicated on the approved site plan and built without permits. Handicap ramp was removed, increased table and chairs, increased the required parking, and there's no parking plan submitted. The covered deck was enclosed without permits and was in violation of the town's flood ordinance. The second application that was approved for the property was a couple of years ago in 2023 for the site plan, which authorized the addition of commercial EV charging station. Now here's what we go. 2.23 for commercial plan review, commercial plan and design requirements. Development plans involving new construction or commercial space must be approved by the Board of Aldermen before the issuance of a zoning permit. UDO Article 4 allows alcohol beverages, packaged retail sales, both as accessory and principal by special use permit. The convenience store was permitted by right. Retail uses require 1 parking space for each 200 square feet of gross area. Lounges require 1 parking space for each four seats at a table. I wish they would say, not a 4-topper. Is it a 4-topper? Yeah. 4 seats at tables and 1 parking space for each 2 seats at counters or bars, plus 1 parking space for each 2 employees. So included in the application are the submitted plans from the CU 1001, as well as the site plan for the EV charging station. And the application, as well as a little presentation that I kind of put together just to give you a visual and go through it pretty quick. So, can we put that up on both screens? Or
What page do you have?
Down past that one, and then go past his application. Yeah, that's it right there. You made that a little bit bigger. Hopefully everyone can see that. So, hopefully you can hear me okay. I'm going to turn around sideways. Can you bring it? Yeah, just a tad. So the plan in 2010, they had the existing 840 square foot convenience store, and they had the deck and proposed a metal roof on top. They were proposing a walkway with porta-johns and a handicap access ramp, and there was already an existing walkway in front. So, as time goes by, there's these, and you change owners and leasees, there's little incremental changes that happen through time. So I had contacted the owner and had recommended or suggested that he could request a modification to the application to where that we could bring the site back into compliance. So as part of the ABC permits, the police department, police chief does an inspection, building inspector, myself do inspections, as well as the fire chief. So we're in the process of addressing all those and working with the owner and management to bring everything up to code. So on the next one,
Deb, could I ask a question?
yes.
So you're asking then for us, because it's not up to code now?
The decks were put in without permits. When you look at what is existing now, just on the overview, compared to what was approved by the board, then, and Chris said, Mr. Kerrigan had said that he would take he goes, Deb, if you want me to take those decks out, I'll take those decks out. And so I had said, don't do anything until we take it before the planning board and the Board of Aldermen. And when you ask for a modification, whatever it is that you want to keep, then say, I'd like to keep the decks with the chairs. Previously, those decks were not there, therefore, and the tables and chairs weren't there, so they didn't get counted into what the required parking was.
So we would be voting yay or nay based on coming up to like that they would be in compliance, or?
Right, and that's what I had said. I don't mind if those decks are there, as long as he meets the parking requirement, and as long as the building inspector says, yes, these are built to code. And I did tell him that I may require that when we get through this, I may require a letter from an engineer where an engineer has inspected it and says, yes, this meets NFIP requirements.
So we would be say yay based on your final approval. Is that what you're asking of us?
You would be making my recommendation is outside of it. I don't have the administrative authority to approve something that was outside of that initial conditional use permit or that initial site plan approval for the EV charging station. So when Mr. Kerrigan says, I want to keep the decks, I can't approve those decks. I can say, whenever he says, well, Deb, I'll rip them out if you want, I can say, don't rip them out, on until we get through this process to see what, what the planning board recommends and what the Board of Aldermen approve. To me, it would be a waste of time, money, and effort for me to say, you need to rip it out. You need to rip it out if it's something that the planning board doesn't have an issue with and that the Board of Aldermen are willing to approve. Does that make sense? Because I'd make
Yeah.
them rip it
Yeah,
out
I'm
and
just trying to figure out what you're asking of us then. So we're either approving it or not approving it with conditions.
correct,
Okay.
correct.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yes?
Okay, so, under the ordinance, this permit application has been, is to be initially reviewed by the planning board. And the ordinance language is that the planning board shall pay particular attention to consistency of the proposed use with the Campbell land use plan. The planning board's written comment shall then be presented with the staff report to the Board of Aldermen. So, consistent kind of with what Deb was saying, it might be advisable for the planning board to review what's before them, comment on it to the applicant, and then pass those comments of the planning board's review on to the Board of Aldermen. They are the final granting authority under the ordinance.
Thank you.
So I had a question, Deb. Do we have a parking site plan that will show that they can provide enough parking spaces to bring it up to code for what's required?
At this time, we do not have a parking site plan.
And
But I do believe that he's got enough, there's enough area for parking. We just need to identify it. Those
And-
parking spaces need to be identified.
and then will they also be required to get a driveway permit for the new parking site plan? Or, because there really isn't a driveway, it's just one wide space. They don't need a driveway permit?
Well, the building was built like in 1984, so I'm quite sure that much of that asphalt that is currently there for the parking space has probably been there for quite some time. I'd have to go back through and I went back through, I think, 2007 between three different mediums, looking at aerials of what it was like in 2007 and 13, 14, 15, 19 to today.
Okay,
So-
so your conditions are that, or some of your conditions for approval are that they bring the parking up to sufficient parking spaces
Right.
to meet code.
Well, and so when we were discussing the requirements, I had estimated that about 16 parking spaces would be required based on what the actual number of bar stools are inside in the tables, like the 4 top tables. So there's a table on the front deck, table on the back deck that are 4 toppers, and then there's this one little like bistro table with 2, I don't want to say high chairs, but taller chairs. So that one wouldn't really count, but currently I think there's 1 handicap parking space and 9 other parking spaces there.
Okay, I know they also occasionally have food trucks, the beignet truck is there.
Yes.
Does that impact this at all?
No, because that would be considered temporary. Yeah. And we're permitting those food trucks through a mobile food truck permitting process. So we're tracking those between inspections and planning department. But with that was one of the things that we had discussed. I had asked Chris if, down the road or at some time if he had a restaurant or if he thought about putting a restaurant in there. Being a business owner and having a business that's at the north end of the island, one, your clientele is going to be, it's kind of like a community bar where it's a lot of people that can walk there. So you want to make it as, I guess, attractive as possible. And certainly, you know, there's been complaints, there's been noise complaints, just like there were noise complaints back when Sean Cook had submitted an application. So we, you know, that's one of the things that we, you know, would like to address as well. And Chris has indicated that he wants to work with the town to minimize those effects.
Is there any parking in the back?
There's a volleyball court in the back. There might be certainly an area for parking where the side, as you first come in New River Inlet Road, where the big tall sign is. There's certainly room for parking there.
The reason I'm asking is if you're moving the handicap ramp to the back.
The handicap ramp was there, and I've been told that it was put back there. They've not called for a final reinspection on the initial non-compliance issues that were identified during the inspections.
I just was wondering if you have a handicapped person who came in and parked, how they would get back to the ramp if the parking wasn't back there.
Because the ramp is in the back. You have the ramp in the front. Yeah, he's
Oh,
got.
there's two?
Yeah, he's got. There's a longer ramp. It seems like a longer ramp in the front. That was the
It
original
says
one.
existing wood ramp. I assumed because it was existing and then it proposed that you were taking out the one in the front and,
No,
okay.
no. If you want to, can you slide through some of the pictures for me until you like get to one of them, like the next one? Yeah. So that's this first picture, I think, is the most current GIS aerial in 2024. I should have it labeled there, and so you can see the access ramp
right?
that comes up through, and then this is the little deck with a little four topper, five topper there, and then on the other side of that is, and I might have an overhead aerial that'll show that. Can you go to the next one? See if I have a. Yeah, that's the front. Yep, there we go. So that one, it was up to like January of 2018. January through March of 2018 for the aerial on the right. And so this was the ramp in the back, and there were two porta potties here. So it was fairly consistent with what you saw on the 2010 site plan. And then there was a little handicap access ramp that went down off that deck. Okay? And then this access ramp coming up.
Thank you.
So, get to. So, can you go to the next slide? Yep, that one. There you go. So this is the site plan that was turned in with the request for the EV charging stations. There we go. Which were over in the corner. And this kind of changed a little bit. He added a handicap access over on this side, but there was additional parking identified. So that's how you got the EV charging station in.
Is there just one charging station or two?
One.
Yeah.
Oh, two?
Yeah. So that was one of the conversations that we had, because I said, well, and I had put on his tab 4 parking spaces for the EV charging stations. And he says, well, why 4? I only have 2. I said, well, because you put 2 on your site plan. You told me you were going to do 2. So, you know, the point is to be consistent. So when there are changes that we can work with the business owners and property owners to get back into compliance. So if you go to the, I think it's 2 more slides down. Yep, one more. So, in the back, this is a better view of the back. So you see the table and chairs, and then you see the deck and the table and chairs. The deck and the table and chairs that has been added here, and there was not a handicap access ramp when I went out there. So if that's not been put back, that needs to be
It's on the other side of it.
on the other side of it. Okay. So, and then there's this mobile, this trailer, which is my understanding that it's used for like a sound stage whenever they have bands and stuff. So even though that's temporary, that may need to be addressed if we're talking about sounds. So, I included in the staff report the required parking, and so that kind of leaves the door open too, though. You know, you have a table in front, you have a table in the back, and if you had more room on those decks to have like 2 tables, you know what I mean, to kind of expand your seating area, this is kind of the time to say, okay, what's if I have to put in like 2 more parking spaces or 1 more parking space to get another, you know, table and 4 chairs out there, this would be the time to kind of maximize what your use of that space is. Does that make sense? Okay.
What constitutes a parking spot? Would it have to be crushed stone, or can you just have grass?
That's going to be up to both the planning board and the board of aldermen. If you wanted to propose that it was, say, natural grass, or if you wanted to gravel it, I would recommend that you at least put like landscape timbers or something out there to where that it's identifiable to me whenever I want to come out there and have beer, and all the other parking spaces are full, to where that I'm not parking over in the neighbor's yard because I didn't see where I could park at your place. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So one of the things that I talked to Chris about also is how initially the Tiki Bar was approved as a covered deck, and then there's like the wood panel, half wood panel that was on the side, and then there's plastic sheathing that comes down, but it's these little changes that one by one that it was compliant in 2010, and we received a letter from an engineer certifying the roof and how things were built. Now we've got all this other addition to that covered deck that has not been inspected or certified, or let's start out with the permitted part. And so we need to address that. One of the things that I had suggested, I had reached out to the NFIP planner to ask if it was like 3.5 walls, would that be considered an enclosed space? And the response back was, well, those walls become a violation from FEMA's freedom from obstruction, because now we have the solid walls there. Even if they're half walls, they're considering those a violation of FEMA's freedom from obstruction. So one of the things that I had recommended a couple of things that I had recommended, and of course it'll be up to whatever, Chris wants to do with it. But if you may have seen louvers on ground floor enclosures, some of them are stained and look very, very nice. That would certainly meet the requirements, and he wouldn't need a permit for that. Another option is how I keep throwing this stuff at you like options whenever we should have like this final plan coming through. But I'm just saying that all these things, there are solutions to any of these non-compliance issues that have been brought up. So if any of you have ever been to Buddy's in Surf City, where they have the bar on the inside, and then they have this little louver thing, or it's like a barn door or something, that either lifts up or slides over. I can't remember which one it is. And to where that the bartender is still on the inside and can walk out and serve people that are sitting under the covered deck. And it's also, like whenever they close for winter, all that is shut and closed and secure. So that's another concern. Is helping Chris fix this to where that the space is also secure. Okay.
Deb, I have a question.
Yes.
I guess I'm trying to figure out what comes first. And I'm wondering if they shouldn't come to compliance first, and then we'd have a clearer picture of what we would recommend to the board and what we wouldn't.
Okay.
Do we have the cart before the horse here? Because I'm trying to picture what you're asking of us, but yet on the other hand, I'm hearing, well, they're not in compliance here. We may, we can do this or we can do that, or they can do this or they can do that.
Right.
And so I'm wondering if it would be easier or more streamlined for them that we're not going back and forth, because I guess I'm a little nervous about just recommending something or not recommending something based on potentials,
Okay.
Yeah, I have the same concerns that Terry has too, because I assume they'll make all these adjustments and corrections and to get in compliance, but we don't really know that. It's just sort of a good faith that they will, and we're kind of approving something with the assumption that it will be in compliance. I'd like to say at least see some more plans that show that once what they do will make it in compliance.
Okay.
And they don't necessarily have to do everything, but at least show something where the parking is in compliance, where some of these other issues are in compliance, and then approve it at that point.
Right.
I have a question. Pursuing that way of thinking, I have no objection, but keeping that in mind, in the interim, if they were going to come into compliance before actually getting something from the board more helpful, would they be in any sort of bind operating the business without the 16 parking spaces?
I think as long as we could, so I guess two of the identifying the parking spaces is one. I don't think that there's any, I would not have any problems with the either the natural grade or gravel and then doing the landscape timbers. And that's a fairly inexpensive and relatively easy task to accomplish. A parking space is defined by ordinance by 160 square feet. So, and like I said, I'm confident that he's got the area in a little over a half acre out there to identify additional parking. I don't want to hold him up on the approval process in getting into compliance. And I have no idea what his finances are, but being sensitive to any business owner, I would like to be able to come up with a solution and move forward without holding them up, as long as they're willing to work with the town. So if it was a matter of the boards, and Chip, are you still there?
I am.
Okay, so in response to the board members' questions, there we go, sorry. I'm gonna look like an idiot walking around this podium. So Chip, in response to the planning board members' questions and concerns about making a recommendation before they've got like a solid what if, and I want to take responsibility for that because I'm the one that has added in the, Chris, you could do a louver or things like this. The louvers wouldn't require a building permit, but it would certainly help as far as securing the space. So if Chris said tonight, I'll take out those non-compliant walls or provide an engineer's signature where they are breakaway or whatever, but one or the other, or I'll take that out and I'll just put straight louvers in there and make everything 100% compliant. Whatever it was that he would be willing to agree to, the planning board could still make a recommendation to the Board of Aldermen based on those conditions that Chris agreed to tonight. Is that not correct?
I think the planning board could, however, I would be concerned that there's got to be a lot more substantive proposal to appear before the Board of Aldermen. I think my sense of where the planning board is that it depends a lot upon what the applicant wants to try to do to come into compliance. And I think those decisions and those determinations are definitely going to have to be made by the time it reaches the granting authority, which is the Board of Aldermen. I think it's up to the planning board whether they want to agree to move this forward with some recommendations on which direction they would advise the applicant to go, but ultimately it's up to the applicant on what he wants to do.
Right. Okay. All right.
I've got a question too. It is coming, we're in peak season, so this is when he's got to capitalize on the business. However, how long are we going to, is there a time frame that we're going to say this has to be brought into compliance by whatever it may be, the engineers signing off on it, the walls, whatever.
Right.
It's still out of compliance and we need to bring it into compliance, but it's a very time-sensitive situation, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
And I'll also say that this is he's making a request to modify his application. I can't authorize him to do anything because this is part of that conditional use where 160D, 403, or whatever it is, that any modifications to an approved development plan have to go back through that approval process. Mm-hmm. Right? So when he says, well, I'll tear out those decks, okay, am I authorized to issue a demolition permit?
Yeah.
I don't think I'm any more authorized to, possibly if that was non-compliant, but for him to fix something, anything that required permits would certainly have to go back before this review process. So if he's trying to fix things where the deck that's there and he could provide an engineer's letter for, right, and then also show the parking spaces, that are available, like Chip said, that's up to you what your level of comfort is. And, my intent was the Board of Aldermen meet on July the 2nd before 4th of July weekend. So any approval could be contingent on conditions and you could make your recommendation that way. Or you could say, come back to us whenever you have a site plan. If you want to keep the tables, then provide a site plan. And the other option is get rid of the decks, get rid of the tables to where that you go back to where that you just have that covered deck. Put that ramp, if the ramp's there, but make sure that ramp's there to where that it was like it was back in 2010 when it was inspected by everybody, plus the EV stations that were approved.
Okay, I guess my question is, if we defer action till we get more information or an updated parking plan and knows what he's gonna do with the, getting compliance with the breakaway doors and so forth, can he continue to operate during, I don't want him to be able to operate. I mean, this is the time you can make some money. I don't want him we have to shut him down. But by the same token, I don't feel comfortable approving this without some more assurances than we have right now.
Okay. So how,
Okay.
yeah.
Just to know what the background is. I haven't met him. Where are you from? Are you buying that? Are you moving here? What's the story?
So I've lived on the island, had a home here for 26 years.
Oh,
So I'm in Dolphin Shores. I was the first home that was built in there.
Oh,
And I
okay.
have 5 daughters, and that place,
Fine, go ahead.
yeah, so these are my 2 youngest. So I originally bought the place to have good ice cream,
Okay.
for them to walk to some place to have a,
Right.
a family-friendly event. Now the gentleman that was originally running it for me, when we bought it in 2016, I assumed he was gonna take, unfortunately, he made some business decisions and he had to go away. And, so next thing I know, I had another gentleman come in and take it over. So I haven't run it from when we originally purchased it. I had people subletting it from me. And these enhancements to the property, or these decks, were done, I assume they were there before I purchased it. So they've been there a while. So I just assumed, and we had, about 2 years ago, we went through being approved, and they came in, the inspector and all that, and everybody approved us. So when I submitted this one, I assumed, it was just gonna go through again. I didn't realize there was all these concerns. So, the EV charger and then the alcohol, board and all that. So this sort of came as a surprise when Deb said, hey, we got some problems here. I know we've got noise issues and we're trying to deal with them. And that's what I was gonna ask you guys, what we'd be allowed to do, to plant trees or do something, but I also don't wanna block their view. So, we're trying to be family friendly, we're trying to, cater to the locals. It's a great little store that they can go there rather than drive 5 miles to the food line. So we're trying to be friendly here. So I'm not sure, and we'll do whatever you gotta do. I'll put in the louver walls or whatever, but we live in Raleigh. So, I have a general manager that's running it, and, so I haven't been that involved up until about 1.5 years ago, I'd say. So I'm not here day to day, but, whatever you guys need me to do, I'm happy to, make it
So,
quiet.
so
I
they,
don't
oh,
think
I'm
there's a
sorry.
problem. I don't know what the big fuss is with noise. I live right, see the lane right behind me.
Okay,
You hear your old driveway? It's fun time, It's not
fun.
fun. You're on vacation, you're on the time.
Well, Deb, who would make the decision? Is that something that the police chief or the fire chief would, who would make the decision as to whether he could continue to operate, or would it be you that could continue, make that decision that he can continue to operate in non-compliance?
I would have to ask the town attorneys that question. My focus is to work with him to get him into compliance. And so whether or not the town wanted to step in and say, to me, the non-compliance issues are things that can be fixed. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and they're relatively easily fixed. And they've been in business for years in non-compliance. I hate for him to have to stop, but by the same token, I don't think we're doing a good precedent if we allow somebody to continue in non-compliance. Otherwise, why have compliance?
I think we're doing our job if we're trying to work with property owners to come into compliance, whether they're a small business owner or a homeowner.
Deb, I have a question in regard to the parking. Is that an increase so they can have more people within the facility?
That is strictly that's a zoning, that's a typical zoning thing mechanism to come up with the number of required parking spaces based on either a restaurant, and there's a table that's in the UDO, whether it's I want to say bowling alley, that's not one of them, but I'm having trouble thinking of the long list of items that are there that, like if it's a beauty shop, how many chairs or how many parking spaces that you need to have. If it's a restaurant or a bar, it's based on the number of tables and chairs, bar stools that you have.
Well, I'm asking because if we have an issue of sound that people have already complained about,
Right.
if it's adding more parking, then I have to assume you're gonna have more people and you're gonna have more sound issues. Is that a concern of ours? Do we care?
Well,
I mean, part of me thinks we should, cause it's we have to take care of the whole town, but on the other hand, I mean, where does that line come?
well, I think that's a very valid point. If you have a deck with table and chairs in the back and in the front, and then you have a trailer where a live band is playing amplified music, then you know where the sound's coming from. So the question is, how do you address that? Prior to and part of the conditional use permit, I want to say 2010, around that time frame, the town adopted the original language of sound and noise in the ordinance was no amplified sound, right? So a radio is amplified sound. The boom box that you take to the beach is amplified sound. So the town tried to put measurements on that, bring it up to today's standards of audio meters and whatnot, to where you can have sound, and what sound is reasonable during certain times, right? So the police have been out there when they have not exceeded that sound limit. The police have also been out there when they have exceeded that sound limit. So that responsibility falls squarely on the owner to make sure that his establishment is taking measures to where that they are not becoming a nuisance and that sound does not increase above that level, and to continue working with the police. Chief Younger is not here, so I'm not going to put words in his mouth, but to me, it's I feel a responsibility to work with a business owner for the investment that they have, rather than to try to make it harder. You know what I mean? So certainly addressing the sound issue is one. In an ideal world, it would be nice to have a neighborhood bar that people could go within walking distance and not driving, and go down and have a beer and watch the game with their friends and walk back home. I don't think it's reasonable that it should sound like a rock concert at 2:00 in the morning in a predominantly residential area. And even though that particular area was zoned commercial, for some of you that may remember, whenever Joe Rodriguez had it, he had requested to rezone it from commercial to the R8, I think it was, to where he could develop it with the duplexes that are there now, right? So, but outside of that circle, or that square rectangle, outside of that rectangle block, there we go, you had Topsail Reef. You have duplexes all the way around. He's surrounded all the way around with those duplexes. So it has been predominantly residential.
I think this island up this way, even Topsail Reef, has changed a lot. And we have less locals. It used to be, we've owned since 2006. When we first got there, that bar was a guy with coolers. Mm-hmm. And it was locals pretty much. With the advent of all these new people moving in, all these buildings going up, they're coming in and want to change what was there. We had a bar I know what that's like. Ours was in Surf City. However, the bar was there before condos went up. And they had to make a happy medium. And it was a time thing. However, it was where if you got so many complaints, you had to turn it down, turn it off. You paid a band. But it's a way we're all going to have to coexist, basically, I guess.
Right.
Everybody, as far as the noise is concerned. As far as these items, I'm wondering where we are in the process. Has the inspector looked at anything?
Well, this is an opportunity. The only thing that staff has right now, or the police chief has right now, is the noise ordinance that was adopted. So in this, when you look at this case, if noise is an issue, identifying, the times or methods, times that it's an issue, and also how can we mitigate that? And that mitigation, or however you come up with that mitigation, can be a condition that's placed on his request for modification. So if he says, for me to be, and I'm just talking hypothetical here, if he says, I really need to keep these 2 tables just to break even, right? If I have, these chairs just to be able to break even, what do I need to do for that? And he says, I'm willing to whatever with regards to amplified sound, live bands, hours that the music's playing, or what the levels are. Right?
I guess
And again, if that's a concern.
I keep coming back to that. I'm on both sides of the fence here because I do understand the business and the need to keep things moving.
Right.
But without a specific site plan to know what is actually being done and what we would recommend, like even just to be able to say, okay, they're gonna do A, B, C, D, and if they do that stuff, then we would recommend that the Board of Aldermen approve this. Or we wouldn't if they didn't get that done, but I just feel like we're kinda, yeah, there's nothing specific, it's kinda vague, and I'm a little uncomfortable with the vague.
May I speak? Because this was just brought to my attention, I had really no idea, just the other, she came to me and said, Chris, we got some issues here. I was like, okay, so if you give me a couple of weeks and say, hey, get this done, this done, and this done, I'm happy to do it.
And I guess that's what for me personally, that's what I'm thinking is that if you as the owner say, okay, I'm gonna do this, this, and this is what I'm looking at for this is what I'm looking at for that, and then come back to us and say, this is what I've got accomplished, this is what we're still working on, it's something specific in a site plan that we can point to that just keeps everything above board and there's no misunderstandings or anything like that going forward.
Certainly, I think I can move the walls, I can put in more parking. Right now, they just park on the grass and there's plenty of parking, usually it's not been a problem.
Right, but see, all of that's vague, and I get it, I get what you're saying, that's worked, but I don't know.
I mean, the decks are only a foot off the ground, it's not like somebody could get hurt. It's the basic things that we can have handled rather quickly.
Is it possible to put something together as a site plan and decide what you want to do, what kind of doors or whatever, the breakaway walls, and then come back before us next month?
Yeah, the louvers wouldn't even require a permit.
Oh, or well, whatever.
See, and that's one of the reasons why I was trying to help them out, because I'm looking at having that open and the security of it. And to me, whenever it's open, it's not secure,
Right.
right? So the louvers meet NFIP requirements, and they're not an obstruction to, they're not a violation of FEMA's freedom from obstruction. It's kind of like a double negative in my brain. So they meet that, and they don't require a permit. And it would be able to help him secure that. And that's the only thing that I can come up with or think of, other than it going back to a covered deck, which is what it was to begin with. How they've kind of pieced that in there is, I think that there was an attempt to try to make it a little more secure without putting solid walls and making a complete building out there, right? So they had the plastic hanging down, and then they had the walls, at the bottom. And like I said, I checked with NFIP to say, if they had 3.5 walls, would that be considered an enclosure? And they were like, well, it's still a violation of freedom of obstruction. So I've been trying to work with the NFIP planner on how can I help him be in compliance without having to rip all of it off, all of it out. You rip all of it out, and it's back to, it's not a secure space, which becomes a huge liability.
Right.
But I think if I understand, if I may interject, if I understand what the board is struggling with, it comes down to the fact that Deb's proposed louvers, does that mean the applicant is going to do that?
Yes.
You've got, you're not in compliance because you have tables but not associated parking spaces.
Right.
If this is put then to the Board of Aldermen, is the applicant okay if the Board of Aldermen says get rid of the tables? Or do you want to put the parking spaces in and keep the tables?
Right.
I think these are the matters that should be memorialized in a document that then is put forward as a plan, that then the board, particularly the Board of Aldermen, which is the permit granting authority, can approve or disapprove.
Okay.
I would advise the Board of Aldermen right now that there's just not enough information to do anything about this.
And that, I think, that sums up our concern as well. So, Deb, do we need to make a motion to defer this item till we get more specific details on what actions will be taken to get in compliance?
Could I request a 5-minute break to talk with Chris outside? Is that possible? Chip, is that okay if can I request a 5-minute recess to talk
No,
to?
that's up to the chair. That's up to the chair.
Okay.
You can have your 5 minutes recess. Call the meeting back to order.
Okay, so we also have somebody else signed up, but I'll let, Chris, you. We have somebody else that signed up to speak also on this matter. So I'll go ahead and let, Chris address the planning board.
Stand here.
Yeah, hit that little button.
There we go. So after just discussing this with Deb, I really want to work with you guys. I mean, the local, it's such a staple there. Whatever we can do to accommodate. I didn't know those decks were not in compliance since we had it inspected 2 years ago, I believe. So this is all somewhat new to me. I didn't even know you couldn't have walls in that covered deck. I mean, well, I will certainly make it a point to take those out. If we put additional parking areas for people to park in, there's not going to be any more people. I don't believe. It's a lot of foot traffic. It's a lot of locals just walking over there. So if we add 6 more parking spaces, if that what makes us compliant, we'll certainly do that. We'll take the walls off if you can give me a few weeks to get it done, I'll get a contractor to come in and beautify it. If you need me to take the decks down, I'm happy to take the decks down, but I think I'd rather keep them. They're 8 by 8, and then the back side, it's not much bigger than that. I'll also remove the trailer where the live bands play on. We'll get that out of there. So I'm willing to work whatever you guys need, and we'll try to work on the noise. I gave strict instructions that, at 10 o'clock, we got to get that thing down. So people are going to be there till noon, midnight or 1, but I'll make sure that we enforce this. And I'll try to put up a sound barrier in the back. My other alternative would be just to sell the property and, develop it. So and I know a lot of the locals would say, we want a store there. We want to be able to place to go. And I think it's been great for my kids to grow up and walk down there. So we really want to work with you folks. Just let me know, give me some time. And obviously this is the busy season. We employ about 9 or 10 people. So they'd lose their jobs and there's not many options here on the island. So, that's what I will do.
Any questions for Chris? Okay, thank you.
Yep.
We have somebody signed up. If you'd like to come up and speak, please. State your name and address.
Mr. Anders, 136 Seagull. First off, start out like I mentioned a while ago, the rumor of everybody saying that we're our problem and everything, we want to destroy the bar, we want to get it, it's false. We do not want the bar destroyed or done away with, okay? We understand it. Now, first off, any actions by anyone on this island that would make things better, look better, and improve the areas, we're all for that, okay? But again, we have to follow policies, we have to follow ordinances, we have to follow town permits to make sure everything is good to go, okay? We all understand that. The plan that he's proposed for the market that you've seen right here and stuff like that, trees and bushes, they're not going to hinder any noise that comes across that or live music or something like that at all. Looking nice, it's going to probably look a lot nice. I mean, the improvements that he has on his plan, we're all for making it look a lot better around there instead of what it was. Again, Susan, you know for a fact, it's changed drastically around there. People that live around there, like Larry that's been here for 10 years, and he said he'd just love to go sit there and have a beer. He said things changed 18 months ago when certain 2 people came in to manage the place or try to manage the place. They have no respect for people around there. Their attitudes are terrible. One of them left, one of them's still there, and the more things happen, the worse it gets. Okay, and not to contradict Chris a lot, but there is nights, Saturday nights, karaoke, and some other nights, there's cars parked all over that area back in there, okay? So and it's locals too, of course, renters and stuff like that. We understand that. The biggest problems that we do have is, like I said, the noise problems, okay? We have bass drum. We have a bass coming every Sunday, a guitar and a guy comes out. That bass is so loud you can hear it all the way down to Oyster and sometimes at the other end. Live bands put in the backyard. I mean, just blaring away. You can hear it all the way to River. People from River has actually called the police So, you know, it's not just everybody's pointing to the people who live directly behind him. It's all around the area. Everybody knows a bass and a drum carries through a building. Okay, so that's got to be worked on. It's got to be understood. We like I said, it's not just Siegel. It's not just the new apartments. It's people across the streets, people down the street, people in River Road. That are, again, we just want things turned down. We want it kept to a reasonable understanding. We all can get along together. We all live together up here. Most other people that do stuff like that. The music's just got to go down. Like tonight, karaoke. It's unbelievable. The microphone, it's like a carnival at the state fair. The way you can hear the microphones talking and screaming and hollering and stuff. Okay. Citations wise, I've asked the police to give me a run. 18 months, 10 citations, over $4,000. That's a nuisance right there. When you have in a year and a half that many citations written, that much because of just not wanting to work with the people around there. Again, turn the music down, please. Okay. Like I said, the back door at one time, Chris did do that. I saw things that Chris had said before. It's right back to being left open. You know, it's just like I feel from Chris. I've talked to him one time in my backyard before. I feel that he's coming, but the other side is the person running the place. It's not Chris's. It's not Chris. It's him. Okay. So I mean, there is workable things. I think Chris knows it, and I know it, and everybody else knows it. Here, we can all work to ensure that that little 8-foot deck. They put bands out there. Why? Inside, everybody knows it's 10 by 10 or whatever in that little area there. Okay. There is nights. I think tomorrow night, a guy with a guitar come inside. We're fine. We're fine. There's one bar. Keep it. Close the door at 10 o'clock. It's fine. Everybody around there is tolerable. We understand it, and we all can go to bed. But there's other times it's just absolutely. It's more like a roadhouse than it is a tiki bar. If you look at the way it's trying to be run right now. Okay. Lighting. I don't know, for some strange reason, 2 weeks ago, there's a string of lights that went down the back of our property and shined right up into our houses. It's like, why? You know, the common sense thing is turn them back in toward the inside. If people want to, you know, they move the cornhole things back to our back property line. Kind of tells you right off the bat what's going on, you know. And then the lights pop up. It's like, you know, it's, you know, I think Chris wants to work with us, but I don't think the management wants to work with us. They work the opposite way with us. And we do not want to close the bar down. A lot of those folks around there won't go back to the bar anymore. They used to go. And they want to go back to sit on the porch, to sit in there and have a little beer, not have to listen to just blaring music. Okay? Examples are good. 8:30 in the morning, the individual shows up, opens the bar up, both doors, opens the window up, turns music up, and goes inside to the market. The bar doesn't open until 12 o'clock. You know, it's just a constant wanting to, hey guys, we don't want you here. We're going to run you away. You shouldn't come here in the first place. You know, it's like, instead of saying, let's just all get along. There's answers to our question, our problems and stuff like that. And I hope Chris will work with us and all come together. And, you know, he can have a really nice bar, nice area over there. And hopefully the people will start, that used to go, tell me, hey, they'll go back over. Let's go over and have a beer. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have another question for the attorney. If we decide not to make a recommendation tonight, does that preclude the Board of Aldermen? Say Chris goes and gets a site plan and has it ready, maybe even does a few things before the Board of Aldermen meeting. Does that preclude the Board of Aldermen taking this item up, or do we have to make a recommendation for them to move forward?
Madam Chair, that's a really good question. The ordinance says that the request shall be initially reviewed by the planning board. So the question is, does this constitute initial review? You could argue that it does. You could argue, the planning board could argue that it doesn't, and you want to hold it here. I suppose that's, really kind of up to the planning board. If the planning board decides to take no action, but they don't object to this moving forward, then it could go to the Board of Aldermen, and this could constitute a review, I suppose.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion that this request for conditional use permit be deferred until such time that the applicant can prove that he will be in compliance, or can prove to the planning board he is in compliance at this time, but is free to present his plans to the Board of Aldermen for their approval on July 2nd. Does that make any sense?
I'll second.
Okay, is there any discussion about it? Any more discussion?
Did that make any sense, Chip?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I think that's fine.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion passed. And is there any more discussion about anything tonight? Okay, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Okay.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Meeting adjourned at 7:27.